Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Amy Cohen, and I am a member of the class of '85 and a vice president of the Alumni Board. I am also proud to say that along with Tolly Potter, class of '97, I am a co-chair of the Brandeis Women's Network. For those of you who don't know, the Brandeis Women's Network is a relatively new organization. Our mission is simple: to foster and build connections between Brandeis women. Since our formation in June of 2019, our network has grown tremendously. We have a vibrant Facebook group of almost 1,200 alumna and mothers of Brandesians. You can find us on Facebook by searching Brandeis Women, one word, and I encourage you to do so. We've also been thrilled to offer a variety of programming to the entire Brandeis community, such as tonight's event with Laura Lauder. Before we hear from Laura, I have a couple of housekeeping matters to share. First, we'll be reserving time at the end of the discussion for questions. If you have a question, we request that you put it in the Q&A box. We will not be utilizing the chat box tonight. Also, we expect to have a lot of questions, as I'm sure you can imagine, and we will do our best to get through as many as we can in the limited amount of time that we can. And also, this event is being recorded, and the recording will be available after the event on the Brandeis Alumni website. And if you haven't visited that website, I encourage you to go and check it out. It's got a lot of really great information on it. I would now like to turn the program over to Elizabeth Jick, class of 1981. Elizabeth is a founding director of Zion's national nonprofit group. She is married to fellow alum Daniel Jick, class of 1979, who is the vice chair of the Brandeis Board of Trustees. Their daughter and son also graduated from Brandeis in 2009 and 2012, respectively. And if that's not enough of a Brandeis connection for you, Elizabeth is also serving as co-chair for the class of 1981's 40th reunion. Elizabeth, thank you for all you do for Brandeis, and I will now turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Amy and Tally. I couldn't be prouder of our family's long-term association with Brandeis University, and I commend you both on the remarkable progress that you've made with the Brandeis Women's Initiative program. It is really an honor to introduce tonight my dear friend, Laura Lauder. I could spend the full hour just talking about how amazing Laura is, her extraordinary generosity, and all that she has accomplished as a social entrepreneur and venture philanthropist. Laura grew up in Ohio and graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. Her venture into Tikkun Olam, or repairing the world, began shortly thereafter. In addition to her myriad philanthropic endeavors, which you will be hearing about this evening, she continues to be an active volunteer. Her current nonprofit board affiliations alone include the Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund of San Francisco, the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Ronald S. Lauder Foundation, the Northwest Regional Board of AIPAC, the National Constitution Center, the Aspen Institute, and Social Finance here in Boston. Laura's signature initiatives that she designed and launched include the Center for Media and Democracy in Israel, which she co-founded in 2019, the Delet Teaching Through Leadership program, launched in 2000 in conjunction with Brandeis University, and the Jewish Teen Funders Network, co-founded in 2012, which is now an international program and thriving here in Boston, thanks to Laura. Laura is also very active with YPO and has received many awards over the years for her achievements. What you may not know about Laura is she excels at virtually all sports and is an avid cyclist, skier, and hiker. Laura, thank you so much for being here tonight. Please tell us about the environment that you grew up in and how it has shaped who you are today.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I'm floored and touched, and I'm very humbled, and I can't really live up to all of these expectations here. But I will say that anytime you ask me to do anything, Elizabeth, I am right there for you, and especially for Brandeis University. Your alma mater is a wonderful institution, and when it comes to phenomenal leadership in the academic world, Brandeis is right at the top. And I have partnered with Brandeis many times in the past, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, kol hakavod to you and the whole team for your extraordinary achievements at Brandeis. When it comes to the environment I grew up in, well, I'm a Midwestern farmer's daughter. My family is from Ohio. They were originally from parts of Poland and Russia. My father was president of the JCC. My mother taught the coolest subject at religious school. She taught Jewish sexual ethics with Al Vorspan. And both were very, very involved in the community. My grandfather was president of the Jewish Welfare Fund of Canton, Ohio in 1947. And I have a letter framed on my desk, which is to him saying, Paul Heller, it is your opportunity to raise over $200 million to help create the state of Israel. We will get there one day. I mean, can you imagine the kind of responsibility? So I come from a long line of people involved in community, of philanthropists, and now it's my turn to try to pass this on to my kids.
Thank you. So you serve on many boards. So how do you select the organizations that you get involved with and the causes that you give your time to? And what do you say to the countless people who ask you to support their causes?
Tough question. Thanks, Elizabeth. It's never easy. So about 15 years ago, I was saying yes to everything. I felt it was my duty to give back in my community to whomever asked. And I was giving to 400 different organizations and therefore having very little impact on any of them. And so I hired a consultant, a wonderful Jewish professional in San Francisco, and she and I came up with a mission statement, a change, a theory of change, and ultimately we reduced the numbers of organizations. We sort of pared it down over time, and we gave exit grants to many of them so that they didn't suffer when we did that. But we pared it down to 80. So from 400 to 80 over 5 years. Now it's even further down. It's down to 50, and yet we're giving many, many times more in terms of amounts. And the reason is impact when you have focus, because unless you have focus, you're not going to have impact. So I'm on 10 boards. You named some of them, and so when it comes to picking the ones that I get involved in, there are 3 criteria I have. First and foremost, the leadership skills of the CEO, because you're not going to accomplish anything unless you have extraordinary leadership. The second is a clear mission of the organization. It has to be a mission that I'm very passionate about, and somehow I can add unique value. And third, there have to be a lot of other thoughtful board members, people who are co-collaborators in accomplishing the mission of the organization. So a perfect example of this is right there in your local community, social finance. Tracy Palangian is an extraordinary leader as CEO, and the other members of the board are friends of yours, Elizabeth, and wonderful people. So, and I'm very passionate about social finance's mission and impact investing. So that's how I choose, and it's not easy.
Thank you. So how have your children's experiences influenced your philanthropy?
A lot. In fact, as a mom, I witnessed, frankly, gaps in the community where I thought I could make a little bit of a difference. And so, for example, when they were at the Gideon Hausner Jewish Day School in Palo Alto, I noticed that there were 2 teachers in every single classroom. And the second teacher was really, really helpful, focusing in on kids who needed a little extra help, or focusing on kids who actually needed to be challenged more. And that second teacher, that assistant teacher, was incredibly important. And then when I was involved with PEAGE, the Partnership for Excellence in Jewish Education, which was a day school initiative, I noticed that not every day school had assistant teachers in the classroom. So I thought, gosh, we need to train master teachers to teach an integrated curriculum, and that way make sure that the children, like our kids, have that opportunity to have an extraordinary education in a Jewish day school. And so who did I partner with? Brandeis University. And Sharon Feynman Nemzer and Yuta Reinhardt were my two partners. They were exceptional leaders, and together we formed a wonderful partnership to create this DELET program, Day School Leadership Through Teaching. It was like a Jewish Teach for America. And for 20 years, we trained teachers at Brandeis, and they then dispersed across like a diaspora all across the country. And now there are day school teachers that have been trained through DELET at all of the day schools in Boston, and of course, across the country. So that's an example of how my kids' experiences. And I'm going to give you one more example because it's actually a very recent example, which is kind of fun. It's a new thing. I haven't even sort of talked about it publicly yet. And that is, my son is now 25. He is he met his beshert in college, and they just got engaged, and we couldn't be more thrilled. She is a dynamo, and she's not Jewish, and so she is now really interested in converting. In fact, they just were telling me that he was teaching her the Shehachianu, which I used to sing to him at night every night, which makes just made my heart soar. And so we're going to create a program, a national program, to help young couples who have one non-Jewish partner to consider working together to get educated Jewishly and potentially then convert. Not required, but potentially. But the purpose is for them to then go on to raise a Jewish family. And we'll do it in cohorts. It'll be a little bit Wexner-like, where there are cohorts and folks go through it together. And we'll have rabbis from across the spectrum. There's no one denomination that we'll be using. And we'll partner with all kinds of institutions across the country. So I already have the phenomenal rabbi to lead it, and a CEO and funding. And so we're super excited, but it's exactly based on my kids' experience. And for that, I'm very grateful to them for letting me know what's important.
That is absolutely fantastic. Thank you for telling those stories. And there's no doubt those will be successful. We have been personal beneficiaries of the DELET program. Our children went through Jewish Day School at Solomon Schechter Day School here in Greater Boston. And we definitely had DELET fellows in the classroom. So thank you. Can you please highlight a few of the successful collaborations that you've embarked upon over the years?
Well, DELET is certainly one. We had 12 co-funders for the DELET program. But I'll give you another example of one that actually was also inspired by our kids. And that was when they were teenagers and we wanted to teach them about philanthropy. And I'll be happy to go into other ways that we've done that in our family later. But specifically, it was very important to us as middle schoolers and early high school students. We wanted them to get a sense of what does it mean to have responsibility to be charitable, and to do all the research and the due diligence and create strategic mission statements and all of those kinds of things, like I had done with that consultant many years before. And so I partnered with a very dear friend, a friend of yours and mine, and she works with the Maimonides Fund. And the two of us created this Jewish Teen Foundation Board, which it was an incubator, and we encouraged communities across the country to apply to us, showing that they had the commitment to create a program of their own in their own local community. And Boston applied, and Boston was accepted. And now Boston has, I think, 3 different teen foundation boards that are now spread across the city. And it's a wonderful way for collaborators, for philanthropists to work together to strategize together on the creation of it, and then also strategize on how to measure success and how to measure impact. And I've just so enjoyed my collaborations.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So I know this is probably a question you expected, but how has COVID-19 impacted your philanthropy?
So it's a fascinating question because, of course, the needs are extraordinary. I serve on the Jim Joseph Foundation, and we created JCRIF, which was a fund of close to $100 million to help institutions across the community in every city in America to get part grants and part loans to weather this horrible storm. So that was very, very important. Another area where I got very involved was at our Jewish Community Endowment Fund in San Francisco. I think your husband is is the chair of your Boston Federation's and Endowment Fund, and I've really enjoyed. I just finished my 4-year term being the chair of our endowment fund in San Francisco. We have $2.3 billion under management, and so it's an extraordinary responsibility to react quickly and strategically to this horrible pandemic and the crisis, economic crisis that it caused. So what we did was I helped seed fund several different pots that were very, very strategic in terms of how to address the problem. So for example, we created a day school scholarship fund for folks who normally did not need scholarships or normally did not need more than 50% in terms of scholarship. But for this year and potentially next year, they need that help in order to keep their kids in school. And so so Gary and I launched it. The endowment fund matched it, and then we raised additional funds, and the Jim Joseph Foundation came in. And as a result, we gave millions of dollars to day schools across our local San Francisco Jewish community. That we had 11 day schools across the community who applied for the funding, and many told us that it really got them over the hump so that they could continue to serve their parents. We did the same thing for preschools at JCCs and synagogues. Once again, parents who never dreamed that they would need financial support. We wanted to make that possible. And now we're doing it for camps for this summer, which we're thrilled to ensure that every parent can send their kids to Jewish camp. So those are one way. That's in the Jewish community. I'd also say, Elizabeth, that I actually got a lot more involved in the non-Jewish community in San Francisco area with food banks. I'd never been focused on food banks before, but we made a $250,000 grant to a food bank. The needs were so tremendous. But a lot of the reason was that we were educated by other funders who were focused in this area. And the other thing was many of them offered matches. So I found that matching grants were a really important way to leverage other dollars. And we ended up matching many other funders in our local community to help through this COVID crisis. So those are some of the ways that COVID really dramatically impacted us. And we really scaled up our giving this past year a lot more than we expected. But you know what? The time's called for it.
Fantastic. Good for you. So here's a 3-part question. So how do you teach your kids about strategic philanthropy? And maybe you can even talk a little bit about what we mean by strategic philanthropy.
Okay.
And will they take over for your giving one day? And are they interested in doing that? And if so, how are you going about training them?
So I know all of you out there have kids, and you're hoping that your kids will follow in your footsteps, will share your values, and potentially carry on when you're gone in doing things in a very strategic way and impactful way. And we felt that way from day one. So when they were very, very first bar and bat mitzvah, we created this little insert on the bar mitzvah invitation. And in those days, you didn't have paperless post. So this is more than 10 years ago. So on the invitation, it said, in lieu of gifts, we would welcome your donation to a youth philanthropy fund. Essentially, it was a donor advised fund at the Jewish Federation, where we will be asking our parents to match our grants to different organizations over the next 5 years that we're still at home before college. So age 13 to 18, we then held these annual giving circles, these annual, we called them the Lauder Family Venture Philanthropy Grant Rounds. Very, very highbrow, very fancy name for basically working together on Thanksgiving and working with folks at the Federation to give us a docket, a list of projects that would be compelling based on a set of criteria that the two kids took turns each year. They would take turns to enumerate, to describe, to say, this is what's important to me. And so one year it was criminal justice reform and how the Jewish community can help with that, but in general, how it affects San Francisco, and particularly juvenile justice. Another year it was tech in education and how can we provide more technology to educational programs. So every year the kids would pick something new. And that was for 5 years. And today, now we give even more, and we involve our kids in everything that we do. And I'm proud to say that they've welcomed that. And it's not easy, because they're big shoes, and so we don't want to set expectations that they do what we do, but involving them in small ways. So for example, our daughter is very passionate about the Black Lives Matter issues. She works for a criminal justice nonprofit in San Francisco. That's her full-time job. And she's also very concerned about our history of racism in this country. And it comes from a source of passion about the question of how Jews have been persecuted throughout our history. So for her, that really makes a big difference. And so she found a fascinating statistic, which I'll share with you, which it just really spoke to her. And that is that if you're a Black child and you have another Black teacher sometime before the 5th grade, you are 20% more likely to graduate from high school. If you have 2 Black teachers, you are 40% more likely to graduate from high school. I mean, you can't pay for those kinds of statistics. That is just extraordinary. So now she and I are working together to create what we're calling a Black Teachers Matter project, where we're going to help identify ways to encourage Black high school students to be a teacher. And if they're interested, then we'll help them with their tuition, and we'll also give them mentors, so that while they're in college, they can help to work in local community schools, and to teach reading in the summers, and all kinds of opportunities, all paid, so that these kids can then graduate and then go on and get a certification to become a teacher. So it's listening to the kids, hearing what's passionate for them, and then ultimately partnering with them and letting them lead the way in creating initiatives.
What a wonderful example. Thank you. So can you please share a few mistakes that you made along the way? I'm sure there weren't many, but you may have had one or two, and
Oh
the
my gosh.
takeaways from those.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many. And of course, you learn the most from the mistakes, right? I'd say that one of the things that was a big mistake for me early on, as I mentioned earlier, is to not have an exit strategy. And so for grants, I had to then create a 3-year cycle, so that I could cycle organizations off of my grant list every 3 years. And that way I can continue to give to a lot of organizations. But if it's on a 3-year cycle, then it's only a certain number, in this case, 50 every year. And those are very specific organizations that can do without having a grant every year. But I feel like it's a tax for me to make sure I give. So for example, public radio. I make sure I'm very supportive of public radio in my local community, and I give a very nice gift, but I cycle it. And every 3 years, I cycle off for 3 years, and then I cycle back on, and I put other things in their place. So that has enabled me to fix the mistake of just giving to way too many organizations. I think another thing is to have an exit strategy when you're creating an initiative. So DELIT is a perfect example. At the outset, the 12 funders worked with Brandeis to say, once we have proven the model, then we would love for Brandeis University to take over the program. We'll provide a funding runway, and then Brandeis can run it and take it over, and we don't need to be involved with it any longer. So that actually happened. We ran it for the first, say, 6-10 years, and slowly handed it off to Brandeis. And so that was a very impactful way for Brandeis to take ownership from the very beginning, knowing that it was going to be ultimately their responsibility to then run it. So I would say that those are a couple of the mistakes that I've made.
Thank you. Those are great examples. And I know the same occurred here with the Jewish Teen Funders Network, where you made sure that you gave the seed capital to get it going, but the local community then had to absorb it and build it from there in partnership with you. And
you were one of those people, Elizabeth. Thank you for that.
It makes a lot of sense, but I'm sure it doesn't always work that way in practice. So thank you for sharing that. So can you tell us what you like to do when you are not saving the world?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, I am a diehard cyclist. I literally am addicted, and the adrenaline rush of biking, there's something to it that just it kind of energizes me in such a way. Even just thinking about it, I get all excited and energized. And it is true that I participated in the Maccabi Games. For those of you who don't know what the Maccabi Games are, it's the Jewish Olympics, and so it's maybe a hundredth or maybe a millionth of the size of the regular Olympics. So, but it was so much fun, and I participated in the cycling event there, and won a bronze medal. I mean, how cool is that? I was on a podium and all that stuff. So, just cycling is a big thing for me. I can tell you what I never do. I never ever cook. I don't know how. I overcook pasta in boiling water. I mean, I'm so bad at cooking. So I like to say that that I can't cook, but I can bike. So at least there's that trade-off. I mean, I love hiking with friends, and I love reading. So I mean, sort of nonstop of all of the other things that I love.
Thank you. So do you use a donor advised fund or do you go through a private foundation? What's your thinking about that?
Elizabeth, I think it's really important to use a donor advised fund. I think that creating a private foundation is, unless it's huge. I mean, the numbers can be very, very big, and that makes sense for those who want to do that. But for me, we give away about $6 million a year, and doing it through a donor advised fund is really the best way. What I love about it is that it's through the Jewish Federation, and so I get help from them. They even allow me to have consultants that I can pay through my donor advised fund at the Federation. And so I have 2 consultants who I work with, and I love that. One is my Jewish philanthropy, which is about half of our giving, and then one is my secular civic philanthropy, which is about the other half of my giving. And so donor advised funds have proven to be very, very effective. Now, you might ask, and you didn't ask this, but I'm still going to suggest that it be asked, should the federal government regulate donor advised funds to require payouts? And for me, the answer is yes. I don't think it will reduce people's, what we do is we give away about 20 to 30% of our donor advised fund every year, and then we refill it. But I think it should be a minimum of a 5% spend, just like a foundation. And the reason why is because a lot of people have an exit from some kind of a liquidity event. They put a slab of money into a donor advised fund, and then it sits. So they've gotten a tax deduction, but they haven't used it to make the world a better place, to do their tikkun olam. And I think that's wrong. So while the average across Fidelity and Vanguard and federations and community foundations, maybe the average is 10 to 15% distributions, which of course is higher than regular foundations. That's because a lot of people spend down their donor advised fund and then they refill it. But a lot of people don't spend dime one. So I don't know what the Biden administration is thinking about this, and they're not listening to me, that's for sure. But I do think it would be appropriate. And it may even be appropriate for the institutions that DAF sponsors themselves to encourage at least a minimum of a 5% spend. So there's an answer that you didn't ask.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and I think we'll open it up to the audience for questions.
Great.
How do you decide what to make public about your philanthropy?
Good question. Okay, so we have a website. It's lauderfamilyfund.org. And I put up there things that I think that the audience is frankly other funders. It is it's folks who are trying to think about how they can have impact and to learn from my mistakes or our process of thinking how to be more strategic and how to scale impact. So we have a website, and I also post up there any press that we've ever had or interviews. Brandeis interviewed me once, and I posted that on the website. But frankly, I don't want a lot of attention, and so I really would prefer not to be very public and in terms of issuing press releases or anything like that. So I'm always willing to be public about what we support. So for example, I'm on the board of an organization called the Service Year Alliance, and it's run by General Stanley McChrystal, and it's to try to encourage everyone to take a year of service, after high school, after college, during college, a gap year, anytime until age 28. And the AmeriCorps program is very much a part of that, but we'd like to scale it even beyond AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps only has 80,000 spots, and there are 600,000 people who apply to AmeriCorps. We'd like to scale this up to, as General McChrystal says, matching the numbers that the US military has as boots on the ground. We have 1 million young people serving in the military, and General McChrystal would love to see us have 1 million young people serving their country doing national service. So I serve on that organization's board, and I love it. And so I'm always happy to write an op-ed or to be mentioned as a participant. But when it comes to our personal initiatives, I don't seek the attention, and so I don't actually publicize some of these things that I'm involved in. But I'm always delighted to talk with other funders and hear what they're thinking, and hear how they're thinking about impact and strategy and scaling. And then and for that, I'm willing to be public about certain things to hopefully encourage other funders to potentially also do things in this space, and also to just chat.
Thank you. So before we open it up to the audience, are there any final words of wisdom that you'd like to offer this group?
Wow. I'm first of all, I'm so impressed that Brandeis has this alumni program for women. It's just phenomenal to convene all of you in special forums with women that care about philanthropy, that care about Tikkun Olam, that care about making the world a better place. I'm guessing that about half of you are Jewish and half of you are not, and it doesn't matter. And it's wonderful to have such a diverse population that are participants in Brandeis programs. But I will say that for me, it's just so important to teach your kids and make sure that you involve them and have them struggle with the decisions that you're making every day about your philanthropy, and to teach them why you care so passionately about Brandeis and everything else that you care about. Not to force them into doing what you do, but really just to make them feel like they're your partners. And I can tell you that when my parents did that for me, it was transformational, and it's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So that would be my words of thoughts.
Thank you. Okay, so as expected, there are many questions that have come in. So
Okay.
we'll just start. Don't worry, we will have everyone out of here by 8 o'clock. So first, what is your advice for a young professional looking to make a philanthropic impact with limited resources?
Okay, now is the question of a professional meaning someone who works for a nonprofit in order to have impact? Is that the question?
I don't believe it's specific to a nonprofit worker. Anyone in their 20s or 30s who want to make a difference, but they don't have significant resources to work with.
Oh, it doesn't matter the number of zeros. Oh, I mean, zeros are not a thing, frankly. It really is about your thinking, your network, the time that you can give, the ideas that you have. I mean, that's what it's about. My daughter is working at a nonprofit and she is loving it, and she's not giving any money to them. It's her time, her, they say it's, what is it? Wealth, wisdom, and what?
Work.
And work. So the work part is the key part, because none of these nonprofits would ever survive without the work part, and volunteers and professionals involved in these organizations. That's what it's about. So I would say the most important thing, though, is focus for impact, because you're not going to have impact if you spread yourself too thin. And that goes for whether you're giving money, small amounts, large amounts, or you're giving of your time. So focus is the key.
Excellent advice. Okay, how should we talk to young children about philanthropy?
Young children. Okay, I'm going to take that to mean young children, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Okay. So there is a website called sharesavespend.com. And this website talks about how you should give allowance to kids based on their age. And you should divide it by 3, share, save, spend. So if and it starts at age 6. So at age 6, the kids get $2 a week for spending, $2 a week that they should be saving, putting in their piggy bank, and $2 a week for giving, for sharing with others. And we did that with our kids. And by the way, the special the break off point is age 11, where you double it. So at age 11, you go up to $22 a week, share, save, spend divided in thirds. And what we did is we had the sharing part in this family meeting once a year at Thanksgiving. So we didn't have them give necessarily every single week to something, but you know, $2 a week times 52, you know, you're getting over $100 there, and that's a lot of money for a 6-year-old child to think about how to have some impact. So I would say teaching them very early about share, save, spend is a really important way to make sure that they begin to take ownership of managing money, saving money, and frankly, giving money away. And the only rule we had was you can't spend it on candy.
Sounds very sound and healthy. Thank you. So here's one from clearly someone from the younger generation. I'm a recent graduate from Brandeis, May 2020. Do you have any advice for a young female looking to get started in venture philanthropy, or where is a good place organization to begin with?
Wow, that is such a cool question. So when it comes to getting involved in venture philanthropy as a young person, I love the idea of impact investing, and there are a lot of nonprofits that are doing that. In San Francisco, one of the things that we did was we worked with all kinds of nonprofits in the community to provide them with loans, with connections to other people, and with opportunities to collaborate with each other. That was impact investing for us. And so if I were a young person, I would want to get involved in some of those organizations that are working collaboratively with others, that are getting funds that are in the form of loans or in the form of partnerships. And so, you know, finding way to leverage your work, your wealth, your wisdom, you know, all of those are it's about leveraging, it's about scaling based on your example of one organization. And again, it's about focus. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. So here's a personal one. Are your kids involved in the training of junior boards?
Really interesting question. So it turns out that that my father-in-law, Leonard Lauder, started the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, okay? And ADDF funds research of Alzheimer's drugs. And it's a very, very tragic disease. I mean, of 50% of all 80-year-olds already have Alzheimer's disease. And so it's something that in 40 years, we've never had drugs that reverse Alzheimer's disease. Having said that, we found some drugs that now make it, that the development is slower, which is of course wonderful. You can slow the onset as well as slow the progression of the disease. And one of the things that I'm so delighted is our son Josh has a very close relationship with his grandfather. He calls him Pa. And Pa invited him to an ADDF board meeting one day. And while he was there, Josh agreed to help co-found the Young Leaders Junior Board of the ADDF. And it's essentially the next generation, sort of the 20 or 20 somethings, whose grandparents might be getting Alzheimer's disease or who already have it. And so in that sense, Josh created this junior board and then recruited bunches of friends from college and from his new work environment and all kinds of places for everyone to come together and create a community. And now they're trying to raise money, not just from each other, but from their grandparents and their parents. And believe me, I know. So in that sense, it's wonderful to see them creating their own new initiatives, and so that's an example. I hope that helps.
It does, and they had a wonderful role model. So here's a good one. What do you wish you would have been told about board service?
Well, first and foremost, every board has to have term limits. I just joined a board that does not have any term limits, and I couldn't believe it. I asked, what are you expecting? And they said, well, we have 3-year terms. It's just that they're unlimited. Like, no. So I would say that somebody should have told me, don't ever join a board that doesn't have term limits. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is, don't ever join a board that you're just going to give money, that you're not going to be involved. And if you're just a donor and they're using your name, what's the point? Why be on the board? In fact, better to be on fewer boards and frankly, not necessarily have your name in all kinds of places, because it's not really that impactful. Instead, get deeply involved in all the boards that you serve on. At least have one big project that you're working on, or something that you're specifically funding. So that's another lesson that I think is super important about serving on boards, is to be actively engaged.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay. What is the program called for intermarried families that you referred to earlier?
Okay, so we're the sort of working title, haven't chosen this yet, but I'm kind of going outside the box here, is it's called Choosing a Jewish Life. Do you like that name? Kind of fun, huh?
Yes.
Choosing a Jewish Life. So that's the idea. The particular rabbi that is helping us create this has had a congregation for the last 10 years where she focused almost exclusively on millennials. And so for her, she realized that it's really important to talk about choice, to talk about having a Jewish life, because it's not about how Jewish are you? No, it's about, what do you want to choose to incorporate in your Jewish life? And frankly, it's not really about conversion. It's really much more about finding the elements of Judaism that speak to you. And if that leads you to conversion, either now or later, great. But if not, you know what? That's okay too. Because choosing a Jewish life is incredibly meaningful at whatever level is appropriate for you.
Thank you. Our federation here in Boston, Combined Jewish Philanthropies, has a program with missions, and there are all kinds of missions. There are women's missions and young professionals missions and municipal official missions, but they also started an interfaith couple mission with just interfaith couples, and that's been wildly successful. So I don't know if that helps as part of this program you're involved in, but I know it's worked here in Boston. We're happy to give you more information on that.
Well, I have to tell you that that does sound great. And I know that there's a wonderful organization run by Joanne Jacobson, or funded by Joanne, called Honeymoon Israel, which of course does that on steroids, and they are way
Yes.
oversubscribed. So,
yes, well,
so
I
think
that's the one.
Oh, that's the one. Oh,
yes,
okay,
they do
great.
it in conjunction with the Federation. Yes, exactly
Oh, no,
right.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Well, I
Great.
definitely need to talk to Joanne and the Federation about it, to partner. So that's a great idea. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Great. Okay, we have a few more. So here that just came in. So what do you think about the opportunity caused by the COVID crisis to look for more efficiencies? For example, mergers of synagogues or organizations with mission alignment in the nonprofit world, particularly the Jewish nonprofit world.
Oh, I couldn't agree.
Loaded question. Yes.
It is
exactly.
a loaded question. And I mean, I will tell you that when I was chair of the Jewish Community Endowment Fund in San Francisco, we actually created a little pot of money to sort of grease the path of enabling those nonprofits that wish to merge to do so. And frankly, we got no takers. We got no takers. There were preschools that were literally a mile or two apart, small preschools at synagogues. And we even wanted to just offer the idea of being able to share resources like HR department or payroll or whatever it is. The reality is that people like their organizations and they really don't want to merge them out of existence. And that's frankly very sad. Now, I will tell you that one really exciting merger that just happened is a nonprofit that I was on the board of for many, many years. And I love the organization. It's called Onward Israel, and they just merged with Birthright. So here's an example. I don't think it was COVID related, but it was an example of David and Cynthia Shapira, who are dear friends, and I adore them. And they merged Onward with Birthright, and it was a sensational merger. So there's an example.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. What junior boards would you recommend to get started?
What junior boards would I recommend? So I don't know about every other community, but in San Francisco, we have something called Fed Fellows, the Federation Fellows Program, and that's for 20-somethings to be a board observer on a Federation beneficiary agency and on the Federation board. So I did that when I was in my early 20s, and I served on the Hebrew Free Loan board. And I got to tell you, it was the best thing I ever did because it made me feel very grown up. And it made me feel like I actually had something to offer, and they actually would ask me for my opinion about things. And it was so fun. So if there is a Fed Fellows kind of a program in your local community, that would be a really great place to start, because then you have the opportunity to serve as an advisor or an auditor on a board, to audit, to just listen. You're not a voting member, of course. And by the way, if this doesn't exist, then find a really wonderful nonprofit and ask if you could be a board auditor, if you could audit board meetings and be a participant. I think that they'd love to have you if you offered your time. I think that they would love that.
Agreed. Okay, so what is your philosophy about giving endowments versus current use? I know we face that all the time.
Okay, so this is a big question. I mean, it's even a question for large foundations. We at the Jim Joseph Foundation don't support endowments, period, end of story. At the Jewish Federation, where I was just the endowment committee chair, we love supporting endowments, and especially capital campaigns that have endowments. So it just depends. Big institutions that give lots of money have different approaches. But personally, I think it's really important to support endowments, and I'll give you an example. Here's the most important thing. When you're raising capital funds for a building, or and Elizabeth, this is something you're so experienced with, especially when people are using municipal bond funding for capital campaigns, and that wonderful opportunity for no interest bonds or low interest bonds to help support this. That is a perfect opportunity to raise endowments. And for day schools or JCCs or synagogues or whatever the institution, Brandeis University, for any institution to not concurrently raise endowment money is a tragedy. So, for example, when I was the capital campaign chair of the Jewish Day School in Palo Alto, where our kids went to school, from 1996 to 1999, and I will tell you that in 1996, I had a 1-year-old at home, and I was pregnant with my second, and I was the frickin' chair of the capital campaign. And I made a point of saying to every single donor, 10% of your gift to go build this building is going to go into an endowment. And you know what? They just didn't have a choice. And it was critically important. And today, the day school now has a very significant endowment. And so I think endowments are so important, but they're so important to raise while you're raising money for other things, because it's easy to raise money for that exciting new gym at the JCC, or the exciting new building for the engineering school. And unless you do it, then it doesn't happen, because nobody likes to give to endowments. So, but of course, critically important to raise operating funds. So, that goes without saying.
Absolutely. Okay, just a few more. Any good books you would recommend to read about philanthropy?
Oh gosh, so many. I mean, so many. Um, you know, I leave that to others to suggest great books. I'm reading Obama's book right now, and I can't put it down. It's just so exciting, so wonderful. So I'm not really in the mode of philanthropy books. I would tell you that Joel Fleischman has written wonderful books about giving, and he and Tom Tierney, head of Bridgespan, co-authored a book about philanthropy and about spend down foundations. I think that's really an important a thing to consider. We don't have an endowed foundation. We use a donor advised fund. And so I think that it's wonderful to read Joel Fleischman from Duke University. Go Duke! He has a wonderful a book about spend down foundations. I think he followed the Avichai Foundation for a very significant amount of time to watch them and to evaluate the effectiveness of a spend down foundation. And Charles Bronfman did the same thing. He also spent down his foundation. And so I would take a look at Joel Fleischman's work.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm not sure this is exactly what the person meant to ask, but what's your pet peeve when you are solicited for not-for-profit funds?
A pet peeve when I'm solicited is that the person who is soliciting me doesn't know a lot about the organization. If they can't answer my questions, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions, I'll give you an example. I was just solicited and frankly asked to serve on the board of a nonprofit, and I said, I'm delighted to talk with you. Here's a list of questions that I have, and when you have those answers, please get back to me. Things like, can you tell me what are the most difficult challenges that the nonprofit is facing right now? What are the most compelling ways that the nonprofit raises money? Who on the executive committee is a potential next chair of the board, and what is your succession plan? Things like that. Strategic questions to actually really understand, because I'm not going to get involved in anything in a small way. I get involved with both feet, and 80% of our philanthropy goes to 20% of the nonprofits that I'm involved in. So, I expect really a lot of understanding of the mission and purpose and impact of the nonprofit if someone's going to solicit me.
Thank you. Okay. What do you think about impact investing? Investing in for-profit companies that are doing tikkun olam, the Teslas of tomorrow.
Oh, I love them. They're the best. I mean,
I know
it's
that.
absolutely sensational, of course, right? And in fact, Gary and I are investors in an Israeli impact investing fund that is investing in Israeli startups that are absolutely phenomenal, doing incredibly cool work. And they potentially will have significant exit strategies. So, everything from drip irrigation technologies to expand them and extend them beyond the beyond Israel and of course beyond Africa, to solar energy approaches, to taking Israeli technology and having it manufactured in China to really scale it up, to all kinds of really exciting Israeli technologies and know-how, and so I would say that that's a really important. Now, I would also say that that is not in our philanthropic bucket. So when we make investments in impact in social impact companies, then we put those into our regular investment bucket, not into our philanthropic bucket.
Thank you. Okay. Final question here. Do you consider environmental social governance in your investing in banking?
Wow, great question. Environmental impact is so hard to measure. I would love to include it more. So the Millennium Goals that were created around the turn of the millennium included social impact and included environmental impact of companies. And so and so it's a wonderful screen. If you're going to buy public equities, you can look at how others have evaluated the environmental impact of companies. Walmart, for example, has done a great job putting solar panels on top of every single building, and every actual Walmart store is uniquely and individually self-sufficient environmentally in terms of energy. So there definitely are ways to do that. In terms of nonprofits, I think it's kind of hard to measure the environmental impact nearly as well. And so if this person has a great way to do that, I'm sure that if they can get to you, then send me a note. I'd love to hear their ideas. But always open to new ways of doing things. Thanks for the suggestion.
So Laura, I just wanted to thank you once again for joining us here this evening and sharing your experiences. This has been fantastic and so informative for all of us. And we wish you and Gary and Josh and Eliana the best as you continue to make this world a better, safer place.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, everyone. Really great to be here today. I just loved it. It was so fun and such an important cause and a great institution.
Laura and Elizabeth, thank you so much. My name is Tally Potter, one of the co-founders of Brandeis Women. Thank you for this incredibly interesting conversation. I know I personally feel energized and inspired, and I'm sure our participants all feel the same way. So thank you for coming and for taking your time to join us tonight. For the participants on the call, just want to remind you, if you're not a part of our Facebook community or LinkedIn community, please look for us, Brandeis Women. Just they're private communities. Just type it in the search, and please join our groups. It's open to Brandeis alumni and parents of Brandeis students. We have some exciting programs coming up. We have pizza making workshops coming up. We have a professional pivoting during COVID to different careers. So look out for our future programming and join us for additional programming. Please keep safe, and looking forward to seeing you all in our next programming. And again, Laura and Elizabeth, thank you so much for tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.